The moment my father hissed those words to the ushers, I felt 32 years of silence shatter inside my chest. "That one is just a shipper. Keep her away from the VIP guests. She will embarrass us." I stood 6 feet behind him, close enough to see the sweat glistening on his neck, close enough to watch him smile at a state senator while dismissing his own daughter like she was a stray dog wandering into a country club. The Stanton Grand Ballroom glittered around us, chandeliers casting golden light across 300 guests gathered to celebrate Richard Stanton's retirement from the Austin Police Department. 40 years of service, 40 years of being the hero this city believed in, and 40 years of making sure I knew exactly where I belonged in his world. Nowhere. The usher, a young man barely 22, looked at me with genuine confusion. He recognized something in my face that my father never bothered to see, but he had his orders. "Ma'am, I am sorry, but Mr. Stanton has requested that you remain in the general reception area." I could have walked away. I could have done what I always did, what I had perfected since childhood. Swallow the hurt, smile through the exclusion. Pretend that being erased from my own family did not leave scars so deep they shaped the architecture of my soul. Instead, I pulled out my phone and called the general manager of the Stanton Grand. "This is Avery Lennox," I said quietly. "Cancel the entire event." The usher's face went pale. "Ma'am, you cannot just cancel." "I own this venue," I said. "I own the event company that planned this gala, and I own the hotel chain where every single VIP guest is staying tonight." Behind me, the jazz band stumbled into silence. The champagne stopped flowing, and my father turned around with murder in his eyes. He had no idea that the shipper he despised had built an empire he could not even imagine. Let me take you back to where this began. I was born the second child and only daughter of Richard and Margaret Stanton in a modest house on the east side of Austin. My brother Matthew arrived 4 years before me, and from the moment I drew my first breath, I understood the hierarchy of our household. Matthew was the heir. I was the afterthought. My father built his identity around being a man's man. He coached Matthew's Little League team. He taught Matthew to shoot to fish, to command a room with his presence. When Matthew graduated from the police academy, my father threw a party that filled our backyard with half the department. When I graduated high school as valedictorian, my father forgot to attend the ceremony. "Somebody had to cover the shift," he said later, not even looking up from his newspaper. "Besides, what are you going to do with all those grades? Women do not need fancy degrees to be good wives." I was 14 when I first told him I wanted to study business. He laughed so hard he choked on his coffee. "Business." He wiped his eyes, still chuckling. "Sweetheart, the business world will eat you alive. You do not have what it takes. Stick to something practical. Learn to type. Maybe work in a daycare." I was 17 when I earned a full scholarship to the University of Texas Business Program. He refused to sign the financial aid forms. "Community college is good enough for you," he said. "I am not wasting resources on a pipe dream. Your brother needs support for the academy." So I worked. 3 jobs while attending community college, then transferred to UT Austin after 2 years of proving myself. I graduated with honors in logistics and supply chain management. My father's response was a shrug and a dismissive wave. "Logistics? So you will be moving boxes for a living. Congratulations on becoming a shipper." That word, shipper, he wielded it like a weapon for the next decade. When I got promoted to shipping coordinator at a distribution company, he told relatives I worked in a warehouse. When I was headhunted by a major logistics firm, he introduced me to his colleagues as the one who loads trucks. When I tried to explain the complexity of supply chain management, the strategic thinking involved the millions of dollars that flowed through proper logistics planning. He waved his hand and changed the subject to Matthew's latest commendation. My mother never intervened. She had learned decades ago that opposing Richard Stanton meant suffering Richard Stanton's wrath, so she perfected the art of silence, of looking away, of pretending she did not notice her daughter being systematically erased from the family narrative. But here is what they never knew. 7 years ago, my grandmother passed away. She was my mother's mother, a quiet woman who ran a small bed and breakfast in Hill Country for 40 years. She left me $118,000 her life savings with a note that simply said, "Build something beautiful, Avery. You have more strength than any of them realize." I wept for 3 days after her funeral. Then I dried my eyes and got to work. I used that money as seed capital for my first acquisition, a struggling boutique hotel near the San Antonio River Walk. Everyone told me I was crazy. The hotel was hemorrhaging money. Its reputation was ruined. Its infrastructure was crumbling. But I saw something they did not. I saw potential. I spent 18 months living in that hotel, working 18-hour days, learning every aspect of hospitality from the ground up. I scrubbed the toilets. I trained staff. I renegotiated vendor contracts using every skill I had developed in logistics. I rebranded, renovated, and relaunched. Within 2 years, that hotel was turning a profit. Within 3, I sold it for triple what I paid and used the proceeds to acquire 2 more properties. I formed Lennox Hospitality Group under a holding company structure that kept my name out of public records. I hired brilliant people. I built systems. I learned from every mistake, and I kept growing. Today, Lennox Hospitality Group owns 11 properties across Texas, including the Stanton Grand, the crown jewel of Austin's hospitality scene. We employ over 2,000 people. Our annual revenue exceeds $140 million. My father has no idea. To him, I am still just a shipper, a disappointment, an embarrassment to be hidden from important guests at his retirement gala. The irony is so sharp it could draw blood. Standing in that ballroom watching the confusion ripple through the crowd as staff began shutting down the event, I felt something I had not experienced in years. Power. Not the petty kind that comes from revenge, but the quiet kind that comes from truth. My father stormed toward me, his face purple with rage. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" He grabbed my arm hard enough to leave bruises. "This is my night. You have no right." "I have every right," I said calmly. "This venue belongs to me. The company you hired to plan this event belongs to me. The hotel where your VIP guests are staying belongs to me." "That is impossible." His grip loosened slightly, confusion mixing with anger. "You are just a shipper." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Yes, you have made that very clear. But here is what you never bothered to learn, Dad. Shipping is logistics. Logistics is the backbone of every successful business in the world. And I paid attention while you were busy pretending I did not exist." The general manager appeared at my side, his expression carefully neutral. "Ms. Lennox, security is standing by. Should we proceed with the full shutdown?" My father's eyes went wide. He looked at the manager, then back at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw something other than contempt in his gaze. Fear. "Avery." His voice dropped suddenly, pleading, "Let us talk about this privately. Whatever I said, I did not mean. You meant every word." I pulled my arm free from his grip. "You have meant every word for 32 years. The difference is that tonight, for the first time, you are going to face consequences." Matthew appeared through the crowd, his police uniform pristine, his expression thunderous. "What the hell is going on? Avery, are you insane?" "Ask Dad," I said. "Ask him why he told the ushers to keep me away from the VIP section. Ask him why he has spent his entire life treating me like garbage while I built something bigger than anything he could ever imagine." Claudia, my half-sister from my father's brief affair 20 years ago, pushed through behind Matthew. She had always treated me with the same contempt our father modeled, secure in her position as the favored daughter who got everything handed to her. "This is pathetic," Claudia sneered. "You are ruining Dad's special night because of jealousy. Some things never change." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw exactly what our father had created. Another person who measured worth by proximity to power rather than character. Another person who would step on others to climb higher. "This is not about jealousy," I said quietly. "This is about 32 years of being told I was worthless. 32 years of being excluded, mocked, and diminished by people who should have loved me. This is about finally having the power to say enough." The ballroom had fallen nearly silent now. 300 guests watched the Stanton family drama unfold like it was the most expensive reality show in Texas history. State senators, police commissioners, local celebrities, all of them witnessed the moment Richard Stanton's carefully constructed image began to crack. My father looked around desperately, recognizing the damage being done to his reputation with every passing second. "Avery, please." The word came out strangled. "We can discuss this later, in private. Just let the event continue." "Why?" I asked. "So you can go back to pretending I do not exist. So you can keep telling people your daughter is just a shipper while you bask in 40 years of glory. You built on putting others down." "I never meant. You meant every single word." I nodded to the general manager. "Proceed with the shutdown. I want this venue cleared within the hour." As staff began guiding confused guests toward the exits, I turned back to my father one last time. "You spent my entire life trying to make me feel small," I said. "You told me I would never amount to anything. You excluded me from family events, dismissed my achievements, and used my career as a punchline for your jokes." I stepped closer, close enough to see the veins throbbing in his temples. "But here is what you never understood, Dad. Every time you knocked me down, I got back up. Every time you told me I was worthless, I worked harder. Every time you excluded me, I built my own table. And now that table is bigger than anything you ever sat at. Avery, do not." I held up my hand. "We are done here." I walked toward the exit, my heels clicking against the marble floor in the sudden silence. Behind me, I heard my mother crying softly. I heard Matthew cursing. I heard Claudia demanding that someone do something. But I did not look back. I had spent 32 years looking back, trying to earn the approval of people who would never give it. Tonight, finally, I was walking forward. The general manager caught up to me near the main entrance. "Ms. Lennox," he said quietly, "you should know that the accounting team flagged something unusual in the payment records for this event." I paused. "Unusual how?" "The deposit came from a municipal account, specifically something called the Stanton Community Fund. Our auditors are concerned it may have been misallocated public funds." A cold sensation spread through my chest. Public funds. My father had used taxpayer money to fund his own retirement party. "Pull together everything you have," I said. "I want a full report by morning." "Of course." As I stepped into the warm Austin night, I realized that canceling the gala was only the beginning. The secrets my father had buried were about to come to light, and he was about to learn that the shipper he dismissed for 3 decades had become the one person powerful enough to expose them all. The ballroom behind me erupted into chaos the moment I stepped outside. I could hear it through the heavy glass doors, the confused murmurs of 300 guests who had come expecting champagne and celebration, but instead found themselves witnessing the implosion of a family. The valet brought my car around without being asked. Word travels fast in hospitality, and every employee at the Stanton Grand knew exactly who signed their paychecks. "Thank you, Daniel," I said, taking my keys. "Of course, Ms. Lennox." He hesitated. "That was something in there." "Yes," I agreed. "It was." I drove 3 blocks before I had to pull over because my hands were shaking too badly to grip the steering wheel. Not from fear, from the adrenaline of finally saying out loud what I had carried silently for so many years. My phone buzzed relentlessly. Matthew, Claudia, numbers I did not recognize, probably reporters or curious guests. I turned it off and sat in the darkness of my car, letting the reality of what I had done settle into my bones. I had just publicly humiliated my father in front of everyone he respected. I had revealed a secret I had kept for 7 years, and I had set something in motion that could not be stopped. The Stanton Grand was just one property in my portfolio, but it was the most symbolically significant. I had purchased it 18 months ago, specifically because I knew it was my father's favorite venue. The place where he held his promotion parties, his retirement planning meetings, his endless celebrations of his own importance. He never thought to check who owned it. Why would he? In his mind, I was still just a shipper. I drove to my penthouse on the 32nd floor of the Phoenix Crown, another Lennox hospitality property. The night concierge nodded as I entered, his face carefully blank. He had probably already heard what happened. Everyone would hear soon. Inside my apartment, I poured a glass of wine and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the lights of Austin sparkle beneath me like a scattered jewelry box. I thought about the first time my father made me feel truly worthless. I was 9 years old, and my school was having a career day. Parents were invited to come speak about their jobs, and I was so excited because my dad was a police officer. All my friends thought that was the coolest thing. But when I asked him to come, he laughed. "Career Day is for Matthew's school," he said, "not yours." "But I want everyone to meet you," I pleaded. "I told them you were a hero." He barely looked up from his newspaper. "Heroes do not waste time at elementary school presentations, Avery. Besides, your mother can go if someone has to." My mother did not go. She had a hair appointment she could not reschedule. I told my classmates that my dad was too busy catching bad guys to come. I smiled through the entire day while other fathers and mothers stood at the front of the classroom talking about being doctors and lawyers and business owners. I smiled so hard, my face hurt. That was the day I learned to hide my pain. The second memory that surfaced was from high school. I had just won the state championship for debate, the first student in our school's history to achieve that honor. I came home with the trophy clutched to my chest, certain that this finally would make my father proud. He glanced at it and returned to watching football. "Debate," he said. "So you can argue better. Great. That will be useful when you are nagging your future husband." Matthew, who was home from the police academy for the weekend, laughed. My mother took the trophy from my hands and set it on a shelf in my bedroom, where it sat collecting dust for years because there was no space for it in the living room display case that held all of Matthew's awards. I was 24 when I finally stopped trying to earn my father's approval. That was the year I started my first legitimate business, a small consulting firm that helped distribution companies optimize their shipping routes. I had built it from nothing, working nights and weekends while maintaining my day job, and within 8 months, I was profitable. I called my father to share the news. "A consulting firm." He laughed that familiar dismissive laugh. "Sweetheart, nobody is going to pay a woman to tell them how to move boxes. Stick to what you know." "I am sticking to what I know," I said. "That is the point." "Right." I could hear him lose interest in real time. "Well, good luck with that. Matthew just made detective, by the way. We are having a party next weekend. You should come, but do not bring up your little box business. Okay, nobody wants to hear about that at a celebration." I went to Matthew's party. I wore a nice dress and helped my mother set out the food and smiled while relative after relative congratulated my brother on his achievement. Nobody asked what I was doing with my life. Nobody cared. 2 years later, I sold that consulting firm for $300,000. It was not life-changing money, but it proved something to me. I could build things. I could succeed. I did not need my father's blessing to make something of myself. That was when my grandmother died and left me the inheritance that changed everything. I finished my wine and poured another glass, still watching the city below. Tomorrow, everything would be different. Tomorrow, the story I had kept hidden would be public knowledge. Tomorrow, my father would have to reckon with the fact that the daughter he dismissed had quietly surpassed everything he had ever achieved. My phone buzzed on the counter. I had forgotten I turned it back on. The screen showed a text from a number I did not recognize. "You do not know the whole story. Check the Stanton Community Fund records from 2016. I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I called Elaine Brooks, the CFO of Lennox Hospitality Group. "Avery?" Elaine's voice was alert despite the late hour. "I heard what happened at the gala. Are you okay? I need you to pull every financial record related to my father's retirement event, including the source of all payments." "Already working on it. The initial flags are concerning." "How concerning?" "Concerning enough that I have contacted our legal team. Can you come to the office first thing tomorrow? There are some things you need to see. I will be there at 6. I ended the call and returned to the window. The anonymous text glowed on my phone screen, a mystery wrapped in implication. Who knew about the Stanton Community Fund? Who knew what records to check? And why were they telling me I thought I was exposing my father's cruelty tonight? It was beginning to look like I had stumbled onto something much bigger. By 6 o'clock the next morning, I was sitting in the conference room at Lennox Hospitality Group headquarters, watching Elaine spread documents across the mahogany table like a surgeon laying out instruments. The initial payment for the gala came from an account called the Stanton Community Fund, she said, pointing to a highlighted line. That is a municipal account designated for law enforcement community outreach programs. How much? $22,500. I felt my stomach clench. He used public funds for his own retirement party. It gets worse. Elaine slid another document toward me. There is a pattern here going back years. Small disbursements from various city accounts, all approved with signatures that include your father and someone named H. Boone. Harold Boone. I knew that name. He was the deputy chief of police, my father's closest ally and longtime friend. He had been at the gala last night, one of the VIP guests my father wanted to keep me away from. What kind of disbursements? I asked. Equipment maintenance, community events, training seminars. On paper, everything looks legitimate. But when you trace where the money actually went, the numbers do not add up. The vendors either do not exist or are billed for services that were never rendered. I sat back in my chair processing. You are telling me my father has been embezzling public funds. I am telling you there are significant irregularities that warrant investigation. Elaine's voice was carefully neutral. What you do with that information is up to you. My phone buzzed. Matthew. I let it go to voicemail. There is something else, Elaine said. She hesitated, something I had rarely seen from her in the 7 years we had worked together. Some of these transactions, the ones from 2016 and 2017, they list an approval code that traces back to a name, A.L. A.L. Avery Lennox. The room went cold. That is impossible. I had nothing to do with any municipal accounts. I know, but someone used your initials, possibly your actual name, as a cover for approving disbursements. They were banking on the fact that nobody would look too closely at paperwork associated with a shipper who worked in logistics. I understood then with a clarity that made me want to vomit. My father had not only dismissed me for 30 years, he had used me. My career, my perceived insignificance, my invisibility in his world, all of it had been weaponized to cover his crimes. Pull everything, I said. Every document, every transaction, every signature. I want a complete picture of what he has done. That will take time. Then start now. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my mother. I answered. Avery. Her voice was thin, strained. What have you done? I told the truth, Mom. You humiliated your father in front of everyone he knows. Do you have any idea what this will do to his reputation? Do you have any idea what he has been doing with public money? Silence. Mom, did you know about the Stanton Community Fund? Did you know where the money for his gala came from? More silence. Then, so quietly, I almost missed it. I do not know anything about finances, Avery. That is your father's business. I closed my eyes. Of course. The same defense she had used my entire life. I do not know. I did not see. It is not my place. Dad used taxpayer money to throw himself a party, I said. And that is just what we have found so far. There is more, Mom. Years of irregularities. And someone has been using my name to cover their tracks. That is ridiculous. Her voice hardened. You are making things up to justify what you did last night. This is jealousy, Avery. It has always been jealousy. You could not stand that your father was being honored, so you had to ruin it. The accusation hit me like a physical blow. Not because it was true, but because it was so deeply, painfully familiar. Every achievement I had ever earned, every moment of legitimate hurt I had ever expressed, had been dismissed with that same word. Jealousy. I am not jealous, Mom. I am the CEO of a $140 million company. I do not need to tear Dad down to feel good about myself. Then why did you do it? Because he told the ushers to keep me away from VIP guests. Because he called me just a shipper in front of everyone. Because I have spent my entire life being erased by this family, and I finally had the power to say something about it. Avery. I have to go, Mom. There is a lot happening right now, and I need to focus. Please just come home. We can talk about this, work it out. I am home. I looked around the conference room at the empire I had built with my own hands. This is my home now. I hung up before she could respond. By noon, the local news had picked up the story. Not the full story, not yet, but enough to generate headlines. Stanton retirement gala ends in family drama. Austin police legends party shut down by mysterious guest. The mysterious guest, I noted grimly. Even in scandal, I was being erased. Carla Mendez called at 2 o'clock. She was a journalist I had admired for years, known for her fearless investigations into local corruption. Ms. Lennox, she said, I have been following the news about last night. I think there is more to this story than a family squabble. Would you be willing to talk? What makes you think there is more? Because I have been investigating the Austin Police Department's financial practices for 6 months, and your father's name keeps coming up. I agreed to meet her the following day. Then I spent the rest of the afternoon reviewing the documents Elaine had assembled, watching the pattern of corruption emerge like a photograph developing in chemical baths. It was worse than I had imagined. The misappropriated funds totaled over $200,000 across 5 years. The fake vendors, the phantom training programs, the equipment that was never purchased, all of it painted a picture of systematic theft. And threading through it all like a poison vine were references to AL, my initials, my name, used without my knowledge or consent to provide cover for crimes I never committed. At 6 o'clock, Harold Boone arrived at Lennox Hospitality headquarters. I had not invited him. He showed up unannounced, asking to speak with me urgently. I let him wait in the lobby for 30 minutes before agreeing to see him. He walked into my office with the confident stride of a man who was used to controlling every room he entered. 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered, with the silver-templed gravitas of someone who had spent decades accumulating power. Ms. Lennox, he said smoothly, I think we got off on the wrong foot. Did we? Last night was unfortunate. Your father was emotional. He said things he did not mean. I'm sure you understand how stress can affect a man at a celebration meant to honor his life's work. What I understand, I said, is that my father told his staff to keep me away from VIP guests because he was ashamed of me. What I understand is that he has been using public funds for personal expenses. What I understand is that someone has been using my name to cover their tracks. Boone's smile did not waver, but something shifted behind his eyes. Those are serious accusations. They are not accusations. They are facts documented in financial records that I now possess. Financial records can be interpreted many ways. Not these ones. We stared at each other for a long moment. Then Boone leaned forward, dropping his voice to something almost intimate. Ms. Lennox, I am going to be direct with you. Your father made mistakes. I will not deny that. But bringing this to public attention will destroy him. Is that really what you want? What I want, I said slowly, is to understand why my name was used without my knowledge on municipal documents. What I want is accountability for stolen public money. What I want is the truth. The truth is complicated. Then uncomplicate it for me. Boone studied me for a long moment. Then he stood buttoning his jacket. Be careful, Ms. Lennox. You have built something impressive here. It would be a shame if your investigation into your father's indiscretions led to questions about your own business practices. Is that a threat? It is advice, from someone who has seen careers destroyed by getting too close to matters that should have stayed buried. He walked to the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. Your father always said you were the difficult one. I am beginning to see what he meant. After he left, I sat alone in the gathering darkness of my office, watching the lights of Austin flicker to life beyond my window. The gaslighting had begun. My family wanted me to believe I was the villain for exposing the truth. But I had spent 32 years being gaslit by these people. I knew their tactics. I knew their weapons. And this time, I was not backing down. 3 days after the gala, I sat in a cramped office at Austin City Hall facing Evelyn Hart, the head of the Municipal Audit Department. She was a small woman in her late 50s with sharp eyes and an expression that suggested she had seen every kind of financial fraud imaginable. "Ms. Lennox," she said, spreading my documentation across her desk, "what you have brought me is substantial, but I need to understand something before we proceed. Of course. Your father will be destroyed by this, his pension, his reputation, possibly his freedom. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about the question. I really thought about it, not because I doubted my answer, but because I wanted to give it the weight it deserved. "I am prepared for this truth to come out," I said finally. "Whatever consequences follow are not mine to control." Evelyn nodded slowly. "I have been waiting years for someone to bring me evidence like this. We have suspected irregularities in the police department's community fund allocation for a long time, but we could never prove anything. Now you can. Now we can." She began organizing the documents into piles. "I should warn you, though, Deputy Chief Boone has friends in high places. The moment he realizes this investigation is real, he will try to shut it down." "I know. He may also try to redirect blame. The AL references in these documents, he will claim you were involved." "I was never involved. I did not even know these accounts existed until last week." "But your name is there. That gives him ammunition." I had thought about this constantly since Elaine first showed me the documents. My father and Boone had used my perceived insignificance as cover. The shipper nobody paid attention to. The daughter nobody cared about. They had weaponized my invisibility against me. I have 7 years of documented business records proving exactly where I was and what I was doing during the time period these transactions occurred. I said, "I can demonstrate that I had no access to municipal systems, no relationship with any of these vendors, and no financial benefit from any of these disbursements." "Good. You will need all of that." Evelyn stood and extended her hand. "I am going to open a formal investigation. It will take time and it will get ugly. But you have given us what we need to start. Thank you. Do not thank me yet." Her grip was firm, her gaze direct. "Thank me when justice is actually served." That evening I met Carla Mendez at a quiet coffee shop on South Congress. She arrived with a laptop bag over her shoulder and a recorder in her hand. "I have been digging since we talked," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "Your father's financial irregularities are just the tip of the iceberg." "What did you find?" "Harold Boone has been running a shadow operation for at least 8 years. Fake vendors inflated contracts kickbacks from companies seeking favorable treatment from the police department. Your father was a willing participant, but Boone was the architect." "How deep does it go?" "Deep enough that exposing it will shake Austin's entire political establishment." Carla leaned forward, her eyes bright with the fervor of a journalist who had finally found the story she had been chasing. "I am talking to city councilors who looked the other way, contractors who paid bribes, a system of corruption that touches almost every major development project in the last decade." I sat back, absorbing the scope of what she was describing. "And my father? He is a cog. An important one because his reputation gave legitimacy to operations that would have raised red flags with anyone else. But he is not the mastermind. Boone is. So if I expose my father, you expose the whole machine." I thought about my family, my mother who had spent her life pretending not to see, Matthew, who worshipped our father and would fight to protect him, Claudia, who had built her identity on being the favored child. All of them would become collateral damage in the explosion I was about to trigger. But then I thought about the taxpayers whose money had been stolen, the city services that had been shortchanged, the trust that had been betrayed by men who wrapped themselves in the flag of public service while lining their own pockets. "How do we proceed?" I asked. "Carefully." Carla closed her laptop. "I am going to write this story, but I need more documentation, on-the-record sources, corroboration from inside the department. I may be able to help with that." "Oh, I told her about the anonymous messages I had been receiving, the tip about the Stanton Community Fund, the warning to check records from 2016. Someone inside the system was feeding me information. Carla's eyes widened. A whistleblower. Maybe. Or someone who wants to use me to take down Boone without getting their own hands dirty. Either way, it is a lead. She pulled out a business card. This is my direct line. If you get any more messages, call me immediately. I took the card. Carla, I need you to understand something. I am not doing this for revenge. I am not trying to destroy my father because he hurt me. I am doing this because it is right. I believe you. I need you to believe it because it matters. If this story becomes about a bitter daughter seeking payback, it loses its power. This is about corruption, about accountability, about making sure the people who stole from this city face consequences. Carla studied me for a long moment. Then she nodded. I will write the truth, Ms. Lennox. That is all I have ever done. When I got home that night, Matthew was waiting in my lobby. He looked like he had not slept in days. His uniform was wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, his jaw set with barely contained fury. We need to talk, he said. Fine. I led him upstairs to my penthouse, not because I wanted him in my space, but because I did not want to have this conversation where employees or residents might overhear. The moment the door closed behind us, he exploded. Do you have any idea what you have done? Dad's lawyer called this morning. The city is opening an investigation. His pension might be revoked. He could go to prison, Avery. Prison. Then maybe he should not have stolen public money. He did not steal anything. He made mistakes, administrative errors, the kind of thing that happens when you are trying to do good work in a broken system. Matthew. I kept my voice level. I have documents, signatures, a clear trail of money moving from public accounts into private pockets. This is not an administrative error, it is embezzlement. Those documents are being misinterpreted. Boone explained everything. Boone is the one who orchestrated all of this. Dad was his accomplice. Matthew's face went pale, then red. You are delusional. You have always been jealous of Dad, and now you are making up stories to destroy him. I am not making up anything. The evidence is right there for anyone who wants to look at it. Evidence. He spat the word like a curse. You spent your whole life being bitter about how Dad treated you, and now you finally have the power to hurt him. That is what this is really about. I had expected this accusation. I had prepared for it, but hearing it from Matthew's mouth still stung. You are right that Dad hurt me, I said quietly. He spent 32 years making sure I knew I was worthless. He called me just a shipper. He excluded me from family events. He used my name without my consent to cover his financial crimes. I have proof, Matthew. My initials are on documents I never signed. My name was used to approve disbursements I knew nothing about. He did not just dismiss me as worthless. He literally used my worthlessness as a tool. Matthew went silent. I could see him processing, trying to reconcile what I was telling him with his image of our father as a hero. That is impossible, he said finally, but his voice had lost its conviction. You can see the documents yourself. Elaine has copies. So does the city auditor. So does a journalist who has been investigating Boone for months. A journalist. This story is going to break Matthew, whether you want it to or not. And when it does, you are going to have to decide what kind of man you are. Do you stand with the truth or do you stand with corruption? He stared at me for a long moment. Then he turned and walked out without another word. I stood alone in my penthouse watching the door he had slammed behind him and wondered if I had just lost my brother forever. But then I thought I never really had him in the first place. The formal investigation moved faster than anyone expected. Within a week of Evelyn Hart receiving my documentation, the city auditor's office had subpoenaed additional records from the police department. Within 2 weeks, Harold Boone was placed on administrative leave pending review. The news hit Austin like an earthquake. I watched the coverage from my office surrounded by my executive team. The reporters spoke in measured tones, careful to phrase everything as allegations rather than facts. But the implications were clear. Something was deeply wrong in the Austin Police Department, and it reached to the highest levels. My phone rang constantly, reporters wanting interviews, former colleagues wanting gossip, family members wanting explanations. I answered none of them. Instead, I focused on what I could control, protecting my company, supporting the investigation, and preparing for the counterattack I knew was coming. It came on a Wednesday afternoon in the form of a press conference held by Harold Boone's attorney. Deputy Chief Boone categorically denies any wrongdoing, the attorney declared to a crowd of cameras. These allegations are part of a coordinated campaign by disgruntled family members seeking to leverage personal disputes into public scandal. The phrase disgruntled family members was a knife aimed directly at me. Furthermore, the attorney continued, we have evidence suggesting that the primary source of these allegations, Avery Lennox, has personal financial interests that stand to benefit from Deputy Chief Boone's removal from office. We intend to demonstrate that Ms. Lennox's hospitality company has been seeking preferential treatment in city contract negotiations, and that this entire investigation is nothing more than an elaborate attempt to eliminate competition. I watched the press conference with a cold knot forming in my stomach. Boone was playing exactly the card I had feared. He was trying to make me the villain. My phone buzzed. Carla Mendez. Do not respond, she said before I could speak. Do not issue any statements. Let him hang himself with his own accusations. He is claiming I manufactured this investigation to get city contracts, which is absurd. You have never bid on a city contract in your company's history. Your business model is private hospitality, not municipal services. Anyone who spends 5 minutes looking at your finances will see he is lying. But the accusation is out there now. People will believe it. Some people will believe anything, but evidence wins in the end. She paused. Are you ready for this to get worse before it gets better? I have been ready my whole life. The worst arrived 3 days later. I was leaving my office when a man in a gray coat approached me in the parking garage. He was average height, average build, with a face that seemed designed to be forgotten. Ms. Lennox, he said, falling into step beside me, you have made some powerful enemies. Who are you? Someone who knows things about your father, things about Boone, things that have not come out yet. I stopped walking. If you have information, give it to the investigators. I do not trust investigators. His eyes darted around the garage. I do not trust anyone except people who have as much to lose as I do. What do you want? I want Boone destroyed, and I think you are the person who can do it. He pressed a small USB drive into my hand. This contains recordings, conversations between Boone and your father, conversations that prove they knew exactly what they were doing. No plausible deniability, no administrative error excuses. I looked at the driver, then back at him. Why are you helping me? Because Boone ruined my life. His voice was flat, empty of emotion. And because I am tired of watching guilty men escape consequences while innocent people suffer. He turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the parking garage before I could ask anything else. That night, I listened to the recordings. They were devastating. My father's voice clear and unmistakable, discussing how to move money between accounts without triggering audits. Boone's voice coaching him on which vendors to use, which signatures to forge, which trails to cover. And then the conversation that made my blood run cold. What about using the daughter's name? Boone asked. Avery. My father laughed. Perfect. She is nobody, a shipper. Nobody will look twice at paperwork with her name on it. You are sure she will not cause problems? She does not even know she is being used, and if she ever finds out, who is going to believe her? She is nothing. I sat in the darkness of my apartment, listening to my father confirm what I had always suspected. He did not just think I was worthless. He had actively exploited my perceived worthlessness for his own criminal benefit. The pain of that realization was almost physical. But beneath the pain, something else was growing, something cold and hard and absolutely resolved. I had spent 32 years being dismissed. Now I had the power to make sure the men who dismissed me faced the full weight of their choices. The recordings changed everything. Within hours of delivering copies to Evelyn Hart and Carla Mendez, the investigation escalated from administrative review to potential criminal prosecution. The district attorney's office got involved. Federal auditors began examining whether any of the misappropriated funds had crossed state lines. My father was formally charged with embezzlement, fraud, and conspiracy. Harold Boone faced the same charges, plus additional counts related to his position of authority. The day the indictments were announced, my mother called. "How could you do this to your father?" Her voice was thick with tears. "He gave you everything. He raised you, fed you, kept a roof over your head. And this is how you repay him. Mom, he stole public money. He used my name to cover his crimes. He literally called me nothing in a recorded conversation with his co-conspirator. Those recordings are fake. They have to be. Your father would never say those things." I listened to them myself. It is his voice. Then someone manipulated them. Boone's enemies, probably. They are trying to frame your father to save themselves. I marveled at her capacity for denial. After all these years, she still could not see the man she had married for who he really was. "Mom, I did not make this happen. Dad made this happen. He made choices for years, knowing they were wrong, knowing they could destroy lives. All I did was refuse to stay silent when I found out. You could have come to us first. Give us a chance to explain." There is nothing to explain. The evidence is clear. Evidence. She said the word like it was something dirty. Your father is going to spend the rest of his life in prison because of evidence. He is going to face consequences because of his own actions. She hung up without saying goodbye. I set down the phone and looked out my window at the Austin skyline, the city I had made my home, the city that was now consuming itself over the corruption I had helped expose. Carla's story ran the following week. It was front-page news picked up by outlets across the state and then the country. The tale of a police department's systematic theft, the deputy chief who orchestrated it, the longtime officer who participated willingly, and the daughter who had been used as unwitting cover, who had built her own empire in silence, who had finally found her voice when she discovered the depth of the betrayal. The public reaction was overwhelming. Messages flooded my company's contact channels, people sharing their own stories of family betrayal. People thanked me for having the courage to stand up, people calling me a hero. I did not feel like a hero. I felt exhausted, hollow, and infinitely sad. Because despite everything my father had done, despite the years of dismissal and the calculated use of my identity, a part of me had still hoped that somehow this could end differently, that he would apologize, that he would acknowledge the harm, that we could salvage something from the wreckage. Instead, he doubled down. His defense attorney painted me as a vindictive daughter seeking revenge for perceived childhood slights. He claimed I had fabricated evidence, manipulated witnesses, orchestrated a campaign of destruction against a man who had served his city with honor. Claudia joined the attack publicly. She took to social media, launching lengthy diatribes about my pathological jealousy and the family betrayal that only an ungrateful child could commit. Her posts were widely shared and used by the defense to reinforce the narrative that I was a bitter, unreliable witness driven by revenge. It was the final public abandonment by the people who shared my blood. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I testified for an entire day, walking the jury through the documents, the recordings, the timeline of deception. I described finding my name on papers I had never signed. I described the moment I realized my own father had called me nothing in a conversation about how best to exploit me. When the defense attorney cross-examined me, he asked the question I had been dreading. "Is it not true, Ms. Lennox, that you have harbored resentment toward your father for years?" "It is true that my father consistently dismissed and excluded me throughout my childhood and adult life." "So you admit you had a motive to harm him?" "I had a motive to seek the truth. There is a difference." "Is there?" He gestured toward the jury. "You are asking these people to believe that you, who suffered what you describe as decades of emotional abuse, discovered evidence of your father's crimes completely by accident and reported it purely out of civic duty." "I am asking these people to look at the evidence. My feelings about my father are irrelevant. The documents exist. The recordings exist. The money that should have gone to public services went into private pockets instead. But you are the one who brought this to light. You are the one who could have handled this quietly within the family, but instead chose to destroy your father publicly. I chose accountability. That is not destruction, that is justice. The jury deliberated for 4 days. When they returned with guilty verdicts on all counts for both my father and Harold Boone, I felt nothing. Not triumph, not vindication, just a vast, empty exhaustion. The verdicts should have been the end. Instead, they were the beginning of a different kind of war. Matthew stopped speaking to me entirely. When we passed each other at the courthouse, he looked through me as if I were made of glass. Claudia continued her social media campaign, now calling me a traitor to the family name. My mother's silence was somehow worse than their hostility. But the most dangerous reaction came from Boone's network. I started noticing things. A car that appeared in my rearview mirror too often. Hang-up calls to my office. A package delivered to my apartment containing a single photograph of my grandmother's grave with no note attached. The message was clear. We know how to find the things you love. I hired private security. I varied my routes. I documented every incident and reported it to the police, though I had little faith in their willingness to help given that I had just sent one of their own to prison. Then the man in the gray coat reappeared. He was waiting outside my office building one evening, standing in the same spot where he had given me the USB drive months earlier. "They are not going to stop," he said without preamble. Who? Boone's people. The ones who were not caught. The ones who have too much to lose if the investigation expands. "What do you want me to do about it?" He studied me for a long moment. "You started something, Ms. Lennox. You exposed the surface, but the rot goes deeper than your father and Boone. There are people in this city who have been protected by corruption for decades. They see you as a threat. So I should back off. Pretend I do not know what I know. I am saying you should be careful. The truth is valuable, but so is your life. Is that a warning or a threat? It is advice." He glanced around, his expression haunted. "I have lost everything because I chose to help you. My career, my marriage, my sense of safety. I do not regret it because Boone deserved to fall. But I want you to understand what you have gotten into." "I understand." "I do not think you do." He stepped closer, dropping his voice. "There is one more thing you should know. Your brother Matthew, he is not just angry at you. He is compromised." "What do you mean?" "I mean Boone had leverage on him. Things Matthew did years ago, things that could end his career if they came to light. Boone used that leverage to ensure Matthew's loyalty." I felt the ground shift beneath me. "Are you saying my brother was part of this?" "I am saying your brother had no choice. Boone made sure of that." He pressed another USB drive into my hand. "This contains evidence of what Boone had on Matthew. What you do with it is up to you." He disappeared into the evening before I could respond. I did not listen to the new recordings immediately. Instead, I spent 3 days wrestling with what to do with them. If the man was telling the truth, my brother had been a victim of Boone's manipulation as much as a participant in corruption. Exposing him would complete the destruction of my family. But keeping silent would mean allowing another guilty person to escape consequences. In the end, I called Matthew. "I have something you need to see," I said. "Can we meet?" A long pause. Then, "Why should I trust you?" "You should not, but you should trust the fact that I am giving you the chance to explain before I do anything with what I have found." Matt. We met at a coffee shop near his apartment. He looked worse than I had ever seen him, hollowed out by the stress of the trial and its aftermath. I slid the USB drive across the table. "What is this? Evidence that Boone was blackmailing you, evidence that you may have been coerced into participating in things you would not have chosen freely." His face went white. "How did you—" "It does not matter how. What matters is what you do now." Matthew stared at the drive like it was a bomb that might detonate at any moment. "If this comes out, your career is over either way. But there is a difference between being exposed as a willing conspirator and being exposed as someone who was manipulated and controlled by a corrupt superior. I am not sure the difference matters anymore. It matters to me. I leaned forward. Matthew, I am not your enemy. I never was. Dad made me the enemy because it was easier than admitting his own failures. Boone used that dynamic to keep you trapped, but none of that was my choice. He was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I did things. Not because I wanted to, but because Boone made it clear that refusing was not an option. He had photographs, recordings, evidence of mistakes I made early in my career. Small things that grew into bigger leverage over time. I understand. Do you? Because I spent years hating you, Avery. Hating you for being the problem child who made Dad's life difficult. Hating you for your independence, your refusal to just accept your place. And the whole time I was the one who was truly trapped. I do not need your apology. But you deserve one. He looked up, meeting my eyes for the first time. I am sorry, for all of it. For how I treated you, for the things I said, for the years I spent looking down on you while you were building something real. I felt something shift in my chest, not forgiveness exactly, but the beginning of something that might one day become understanding. What are you going to do? I asked. Turn myself in, cooperate fully, accept whatever consequences come. He pushed the drive back toward me. You do not need this. I will tell them everything myself. Matthew's voluntary cooperation accelerated the investigation beyond anything I had anticipated. He provided testimony about the full scope of Boone's network. Names, dates, methods, payments. A map of corruption that stretched across the police department and into City Hall, touching contractors and politicians and business owners who had paid for protection and preferential treatment. The city reeled. Resignations came in waves. 3 city councilors, a dozen mid-level police officers, the director of municipal contracts, each one claiming ignorance, blaming Boone, trying to salvage what they could of their reputations. Through it all, my name remained at the center of the story. The woman who exposed the truth, the shipper who brought down an empire, the daughter who chose justice over family. I gave no interviews, made no public statements. I let the evidence speak for itself and focused on running my company. But the spotlight found me anyway. Lennox Hospitality Group became synonymous with integrity, with courage, with the idea that success built on real merit would always triumph over success built on corruption. Our booking rates soared. Partnership offers flooded in. Investors who had once ignored us suddenly wanted meetings. The irony was not lost on me. My father had spent 30 years trying to convince the world I was worthless. His downfall had made me more valuable than ever. The sentencing hearings took place on a gray Tuesday in November. I attended, sitting in the back of the courtroom, watching as my father and Harold Boone stood before the judge to learn their fates. Boone went first. 15 years federal prison, plus restitution, that would consume every asset he had ever accumulated. He showed no emotion as the sentence was read, just stared straight ahead with the blank expression of a man who had finally run out of ways to manipulate his circumstances. Then it was my father's turn. The judge reviewed his record, 40 years of service commendations, the respect he had earned from the community he served. Then she reviewed his crimes, the systematic theft, the fraud, the violation of public trust. Mr. Stanton, she said, you were given the privilege of protecting this city. Instead, you used that privilege to enrich yourself at the expense of the people you swore to serve. You involved your own daughter without her knowledge in schemes designed to evade detection. You showed contempt for the very principles you claimed to uphold. My father said nothing. His lawyer had advised him to remain silent, to show remorse through quiet acceptance rather than words that might be used against him in appeals. But then, just before the judge pronounced the sentence, he turned and looked at me. It was the first time he had met my eyes since the investigation began. I expected anger, hatred, the same contempt he had shown me my entire life. Instead, I saw something that looked almost like regret. Then he turned away, and the moment passed. Richard Stanton, I sentence you to 12 years in federal prison with possibility of parole after 8 years, plus full restitution of all misappropriated funds. 12 years. By the time he got out, assuming he lived that long, he would be 83 years old. I left the courthouse without speaking to anyone, drove to my grandmother's grave in Hill Country, the woman whose inheritance had made everything possible. I sat beside her headstone for hours, watching the sun move across the sky, thinking about all the paths that had led to this moment. "I did it, Grandma," I said finally. "I built something beautiful. I stood up for the truth. I became someone you would be proud of." The wind rustled through the trees, and I chose to believe it was her answer. In the months following the sentencing, I began rebuilding what remained of my family relationships. Matthew and I met weekly for coffee, slowly learning to see each other without the distortions our father had imposed. He was finishing his cooperation with investigators, preparing for his own sentencing, which would be reduced significantly given his voluntary testimony. "I do not know what comes next," he said one morning. "You start over," I told him. "It is not going to be easy, but starting over is better than sinking." He nodded, not convinced, not arguing either. It was something. My mother had a harder case. She visited me once 3 weeks after the sentencing, sat in my living room with a cup of tea growing cold in her hands, looking around at the penthouse like she was seeing an alien world. "I do not understand," she said. "Any of this. The company, the hotels, the success. How did you do it without telling us? Would you have believed me if I had told you?" She was silent for a long moment. Then, "No, probably not." "That is why I did not say anything. But all those years when your father was calling you names, dismissing your work, you never said anything. You let us think you were just a shipper." I smiled slightly. "I was a shipper, Mom, and then I became more. Those two things are not contradictory. Shipping taught me logistics operations, how to move things efficiently from one place to another. Those skills built everything I have now. Your father always said shipping was beneath you. No, Dad said shipping was all I was capable of. There is a difference. He wanted to limit me. I chose to grow." She set down her untouched tea. "I am sorry, Avery, for all of it. For not standing up for you, for not seeing what was happening, for choosing your father's comfort over your well-being." "I know. Does that mean you forgive me?" I thought about the question carefully. "It means I am working on it." She nodded, accepting that was the best she would get for now. As she was leaving, she paused at the door. "Your grandmother would have been so proud of you. She always said you were special." "I know. That is why I keep her picture in my office." After she left, I stood at my window and watched the sunset paint the Austin skyline in shades of gold and rose. Later that evening, my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "Check the South Wing storage vault at Stanton PD. Look for files tied to Boone year 2016. Do not go alone." The whistleblower. They had been silent ever since giving me the first USB drive. I almost believed they had disappeared for good. Apparently not. I forwarded the screenshot to Elaine and then called her. "You saw it?" I asked. "I did. Avery, if this lead is real, it could reopen every part of the investigation they have not touched yet. I am going to check it. Avery, do not go by yourself. I am serious." "I am not planning to." I hung up and immediately dialed Matthew. He answered on the second ring. "Avery, I need you to meet me at the old station," I said. "South Wing, the vault." Silence. Then, "You got another message, did you not?" "Yes." He exhaled. "Okay, I will be there. But Avery, if those files are what I think they are, this is not just about Dad and Boone anymore." "I know." When we pulled up to the station that night, the building looked different than the one I remembered from childhood. Maybe it was me who was different. Maybe knowing what had happened behind those walls made the whole place feel colder. Security let us in without questions. They knew Matthew even now, even after everything. We walked down the South Wing hallway, fluorescent lights flickering above us. The vault door was at the end of the corridor, thick metal, old but reinforced. Matthew punched in the code. The vault opened with a heavy, echoing click. Inside were rows of shelves filled with boxes, records, files, binders that had been sitting untouched for years. "What are we looking for?" he asked. 2016. Anything with Boone's initials. We split up. The room was silent, except for the sound of boxes sliding off shelves and paper shifting. 10 minutes in, Matthew called out, "Avery." I crossed over. He held a file folder thin, but sealed with a red binder clip, meaning restricted access. Across the front in black ink were the initials HB/RS/AL 2016. My stomach twisted. My father's initials, Boone's, and mine used without my knowledge. Again. Matthew swallowed. "Do you want to open it?" I nodded. Inside were copies of transactions, not just approvals. Names of vendors who never existed. Receipts for equipment that was never ordered. Community fund withdrawals disguised as training day supplies. The kind of files that could put more people in prison. And one page that turned my blood cold. A handwritten note, clearly my father's. "AL paperwork works. Nobody checks her signature. Keep using." I did not speak. I did not need to. Matthew closed his eyes like someone had punched him. "Avery, I am sorry," he whispered. "I did not know. I swear I did not know he used you like this." I inhaled slowly. The vault felt too small, too full, too heavy with secrets that had been rotting for years. "It is not about being sorry anymore," I said quietly. "It is about finishing what we started." When we walked out of that vault, I felt a shift inside me. Not anger, not even grief, but something deeper. Resolve. This was not just my father's darkness. It was not just Boone's corruption. This was a whole system that believed some people were invisible enough to exploit. That belief was about to end, and I was going to be the one to end it. 1 year after the gala that started everything, I stood on the stage of the newly renamed Phoenix Crown Hotel, addressing 300 guests at an event I had never imagined hosting. The Austin Business Leadership Award ceremony, and I was the honoree. "When I was growing up," I said, looking out at the crowd of entrepreneurs, investors, and civic leaders, "I was told repeatedly that I would never amount to anything. My father called me just a shipper, and he meant it as an insult. He could not imagine that the skills I was learning, logistics operations, problem-solving under pressure, would someday form the foundation of everything I built." The room was silent, attentive. I spent 30 years believing I was worthless because the people who were supposed to love me said I was. I spent 30 years hiding my success because I had internalized their judgment so deeply that I was afraid of being seen. I paused, gathering myself. Then I learned something that changed everything. My father had not just dismissed me. He had used me. My name, my identity, my perceived insignificance, all of it weaponized to cover crimes I knew nothing about. I saw Carla Mendez in the front row, the journalist whose story had helped bring the truth to light. She gave me a small nod. I could have stayed silent. I could have protected my family's reputation, buried the evidence, pretended I had never learned what I learned. Many people would have understood that choice. But I was raised to believe in integrity, even if the people who taught me those words did not practice them. I was raised to believe that right is right, even when it is costly. I was raised to believe that truth matters. So I told the truth. And yes, it cost me my father. It cost me years of believing I might someday have his approval. It cost me the fantasy of a loving family that never really existed. But it gave me something far more valuable. I looked around the room at the faces of people who had built businesses and careers on principles I shared. It gave me the knowledge that I am exactly who I always believed I could be. Not because anyone else validated me, not because my father finally admitted he was wrong, but because I chose to stand up for what was right regardless of the personal cost. That is what leadership means to me. Not power or prestige or profit. Leadership means choosing integrity when silence would be easier. Leadership means speaking truth when lies would be more comfortable. Leadership means building something real, even when everyone around you says it cannot be done. I lifted my award, the crystal sculpture that somehow represented everything I had survived. This award does not belong to me alone. It belongs to every person who has ever been told they are not enough, every person who has been dismissed, overlooked, or underestimated, every person who has had to build their own table because they were denied a seat at someone else's. If you are one of those people, I want you to know something. I looked directly into the camera that was streaming this event live across the city. You are not nothing. You are not worthless. You are not limited by what anyone else thinks of your potential. You are exactly as powerful as you choose to be. And no one, not your family, not your critics, not the voice in your head that echoes their cruelty, no one can take that away from you. The applause that followed was the loudest thing I had ever heard. After the ceremony, I slipped away from the reception to stand on the balcony of the Phoenix Crown, looking out at the city that had witnessed my transformation. Marcus, my COO, found me there, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. "You should be inside celebrating," he said. I needed a moment. He handed me a glass and stood beside me in comfortable silence. "Your father wrote to you," he said finally. I did not turn. "I know, I have not opened it yet." "Are you going to?" "Eventually, when I am ready." "What do you think it says?" I considered the question. Probably a combination of justification and blame. He will explain why everything he did made sense at the time. He will find ways to make himself the victim. That is what he has always done. You might be surprised. Maybe. I sipped my champagne, but I have spent too many years hoping for surprises from my father. I would rather expect nothing and be pleasantly surprised than expect change and be disappointed again. Marcus nodded. That is fair. We stood together as the city lights sparkled below us. I have been thinking about expansion, I said. New markets. Houston, Dallas, maybe even out of state. That is ambitious. I have never been anything else. He smiled. No, you have not. Thank you, Marcus, for believing in me when I was just a woman with $100,000 and a dream. You were never just anything. You were determined. There is a difference. I have heard that before. From who? From my grandmother. She used to say that the world calls determined women crazy because they do not know what else to call them. She sounds like someone I would have liked. You would have. I raised my glass. To her, and to everyone who ever bet on me when the odds looked impossible. We clinked glasses and drank. Tomorrow, there will be more work to do. More empires to build, more truths to speak, more battles to fight. But tonight, just for a moment, I allowed myself to feel proud of how far I had come. I opened my father's letter on a quiet Sunday morning 6 months after the sentencing. The envelope felt lighter than I expected, and the 2 pages inside were filled with small, uneven handwriting. He didn't offer an apology, not directly. Most of it read like an explanation he'd rehearsed for years. Pressure, expectations, the weight of a reputation he didn't know how to maintain anymore. But the last paragraph stopped me. I was wrong about you, Avery. I see that now. I spent years trying to shape you into something familiar, and I never noticed who you were actually becoming. You carry more strength than I ever did. You've held on to honesty in ways I couldn't. Whatever else I failed at, I know this much. I raised someone who had the courage to stand up to me when I lost my way. I don't expect forgiveness. I doubt I deserve it. But for the first time, I see you. Your father. I set the pages down and looked out across the Austin skyline. Nothing he wrote fit the apology I once begged for in my head. It wasn't the acknowledgement I had chased for so long. It was uneven and unfinished, and part of it felt like an attempt to soften his own fall. Still, it cracked open a space that had been sealed shut for most of my life. A small break in the wall he built between us. A quiet admission that I had never been invisible. I called my mother afterward. I read Dad's letter, I told her. She hesitated before asking, "What did you think?" "It's a start," I said. "Will you visit him eventually?" "When I'm ready. It can't be for him. It has to be for me." "I understand." There was a long breath on her end of the line. Then she said, "I never meant to fail you. I just didn't know how to push back against him." "I know. Can you forgive me? I'm working on it," I said. Every day a little more. When the call ended, I went to my desk and picked up my grandmother's picture, the one that sat beside me through every meeting, every crisis, every win. "We'll be okay," I whispered to her. "Not perfect, but okay." The thought of her voice came back to me the way memories often do, soft, steady, reassuring. "That's all any of us can hope for, sweetheart. Keep going. Keep getting better." I turned toward the stack waiting on my desk, reports, proposals, early plans for expansions I had once only dreamed about. The work didn't slow down, and I didn't want it to. Building gave me a sense of steadiness that had nothing to do with my father's approval. For the first time, I wasn't creating out of fear or desperation. The drive came from a place that felt grounded. The old weight, the shame, the constant need to prove myself finally loosened its grip. Running a company wasn't just a career anymore. It was a reminder that I had done something with every moment someone tried to make me small. Every hotel we opened, every team we trained, every guest who walked through our doors, each one was quiet proof. The girl dismissed as just a shipper had built something real. If I learned anything from all of this, it's that people who try to limit you are often reacting to their own fears. They shrink your world because they don't know how to expand their own. They challenge your dreams because they've stopped chasing theirs. They tear down what they never had the courage to build. They don't see what's taking shape inside you, so they call it nothing. But being underestimated doesn't stop growth. It only hides it until the moment you no longer fit inside the version of you they invented. My father used that word for 30 years, shipper, as if it defined the ceiling of my life. What he didn't understand was that the job taught me how systems move and how people operate. It taught me to solve problems, organize chaos, and build from nothing. It was the foundation he never looked closely enough to notice. Now I stand in a penthouse overlooking a city that once looked right past me. The same city where I built an entire hospitality group from the ground up without shortcuts, without favors, without needing anyone to give me permission. If this story reaches you at a moment when you feel pushed aside or talked over, I hope it gives you something steady to hold on to. Meaning doesn't come from the people who underestimate you. It grows from the choices you make when no one believes you're capable of more. Voices will try to shrink your space, some out of fear, some out of habit. Let them talk. Their opinions only matter if you let them shape your steps. Moving toward what you want is already evidence that they misread you. Every boundary is a small act of rebuilding. Every dream you dare to say out loud marks another step away from the version of yourself they tried to contain. Your work, your values, your refusal to compromise those things speak louder than any label someone pinned on you out of convenience or smallness. And when recognition comes, let it land on your shoulders, not theirs. You're the one who stayed in the fight. You're the one who carried yourself through the days no one else saw. If any part of my journey feels familiar, tell me yours. I read every message. These stories matter more than people admit. And if you'd like to walk through more chapters like this with me, tap subscribe. I'll be back soon. Until then, remember this. Someone else's blindness doesn't erase your worth. You don't disappear just because they refuse